going to call the joint workshop for the BPW and the city to order. All the members of the board are present. We have Andrew Williams, our ex officio, who also happens to be the mayor, and we'll call his side to order. Austin Callaman, Robin Davis, and Mike Hoffman, who's just stepped out of the room. So.
Yeah, I'll do our roll call for us. I have Councilman Saliba's here, Councilman Elder, Councilperson Jones, Councilperson Ritzer, City Manager Anne Marie Townsend, and Glenn Mandelis is present, just stepped outside. He'll be attending as well. And I see Ellen Lorraine, our Assistant City Manager, sitting here as well. Thank you.
So the first item on the agenda is a discussion about the joint capital projects for both the city and the BPW. And that will be led by our engineer, Charlie, from GMB.
Is that my cue?
Yep, that's your cue.
The council comes in and now you can talk.
Take it away, Charlie.
Aren't we waiting on Austin?
He's right there.
Oh, I didn't recognize.
You you didn't recognize him with the,
I like that.
So, okay, we'll get started. There's a lot of projects here, so I'm going to try to move through them relatively fast, but certainly we can ask and discuss any questions you have. They are preliminary project estimates, looking forward for when the projects go into actual design and construction. And the PowerPoint that you have in front of you has a series of projects that are in front of you for various reasons. The BPW completed in June a water main assessment across their whole water distribution system. So there were a number of projects that were prioritized coming out of that report and that study. And several of these streets that we're going to talk about today were impacted by the results of that study, which in a nutshell was that we didn't necessarily discover, but we confirmed quite a bit of very old cast iron and ductile iron pipe in our distribution system. It's not like it's going to fall apart tomorrow, but some of it is upwards of 75, 80 years old, so it's time for the city and the board to consider, replacing it so we can move in for the next 100 years. And then there were some other projects like Alaska Avenue that got put on the list because of various reasons. There's some projects that were on the agenda that are strictly street projects, not BPW utility projects, and I'll talk about why when we get to them. I did put on the very first sheet, Hornkill Avenue, Hornkill city limit to end of road, which I know we had the meeting with the residents probably 8 weeks ago, roughly. So I wasn't going to go back through that when I accidentally put it on that front, but if you want to, we can certainly discuss that some more. But we will go over the Hornkill Avenue from Pilottown Road to the existing city limits. And just a reminder that all these costs are in 2023 dollars. So whenever a prioritization schedule is developed, they will be revised to reflect the expected future cost of those projects depending on when those projects are scheduled to be completed with you.
Charlie, I have a question for you. When you mentioned that you did a water main study,
Yeah,
did that include the sewer side as well? Or just
the water main.
just the
Yeah.
bottom? Okay,
Mhm.
just the water side.
Water main assessment study. The board had received a 50-50 matching planning grant from the Office of Drinking Water strictly for the water distribution system. And we had really good as-built records of the entire distribution system. Ben Hearn's with me. We work together. And he has modeled the entire water system. So we have a really good idea of what's in the ground, but we had to confirm the conditions. So it was very interesting when we actually field confirmed. We take what's called, I should have brought a coupon out of the top of an old cast iron pipe and kind of flip it back and forth and check the outside of it and check the inside of it for corrosion and, big word, tuberculation. Can you spell that? I got a question for you. Can you spell that for me?
Yeah.
No, anyway, so we were able to identify a lot of water mains that the board wants to replace.
Okay, and as far as the sewer side, is that yet to be determined if there's a need for that to be replaced? And, or will that be an additional study?
So, go ahead,
I was gonna
Austin.
say, it's always coupled, so if, like, for example, most of the time, they did water main and sewer main at the same time.
Right.
There are, not to say there's anomalies that are out there, but when we talk about these projects, they're coupled together. So if we're tackling water main, we're also tackling sewer main.
Okay, so the costs that are included in this spreadsheet would in fact include water and sewer?
And storm. There's
And
storm.
storm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah, to the extent, there are a couple, we'll get to it, there are a couple streets that have PVC sewer that's not in need of replacement.
you. Right, thank you very much.
Okay. So, I guess let's just dive into it, move right to the first one, Alaska Avenue Street Utility Improvements. This came up, it's been on the agenda probably for 2 years now, and I'll let Anne Marie and Austin discuss the reasons for why this project's on the list, but there is a city portion and there is a board portion. Basically what we're doing is providing an actual complete street, to serve the two existing parcels that are to the ferry side of Alaska Avenue, and then also to serve what is a proposed development at the corner across from Dairy Queen. I think everybody's pretty much aware of that. So we had done some testing a couple years ago, and we fell out on the city side at least on a porous asphalt system. The seasonal groundwater level's not quite as low as what we typically would use with a porous asphalt system, but it's still low enough that the porous will provide storage and also infiltration. So we just thought it was the best way to go because there's not really a drainage system in this area to tie into. And it's not gonna have curb and gutter to channel flow or anything like that. So it's just a porous asphalt system. We do have a drainage swale from Cape and Lopin Drive to the wetlands that are to the rear of the extent of the project. Just so you know, DelDOT is somewhere in the works of working on a plan that will alleviate all that ponding that occurs in front of Dairy Queen every time we have any kind of hard rain. And the plan that we have, which is very preliminary, shows a several catch basin arrangement on the Dairy Queen side, pretty much down to right in front of where we're talking about, and then piping it over into this swale that would be part of the city's project. And that would also then drain into the wetlands. So we'd have to coordinate with them on the final design. There'll be some property transitions. We don't expect a whole lot of work there. But including engineering and the construction cost, the total city portion would be $153,500. I had provided Ellen Lorraine this morning with the design cost, which would be approximately $15,332.
In addition to the 1.5?
No, it's all included in that 38,330.
Okay, so please design.
So one thing that I did want to state on this one is Austin and I did receive a proposal from GMB for the design and bid and construction phase services for Alaska Avenue. We have not yet signed that proposal because it's in neither budgets at this time. So I think if it is something that the city and the board want us to move forward with, that's something we'd want to know. And I do know that Mr. Quill has been asking because DelDOT is going to tie this to his entrance approval.
Are you talking about the engineering? Because it wouldn't make sense to build the road before they're done constructing whatever they're gonna construct over there, right?
Right, so, but do we want to proceed at this point with the engineering so that it's ready to be put out to bid?
We
So is
can't
that-
take action tonight anyway, right?
I don't think, we haven't put it on the agenda, but, again, we can put this on the next council agenda.
May I ask a question, Anne Marie? Does Quill, as the applicant, does he need an engineering study from the city to be able to get the necessary permit from DelDOT to do his entrance?
Well, his entrance would be onto Alaska,
Right,
so DelDOT is going to want to see, they are not going to approve his access until we've got our project in the process.
but the process could include just the engineering piece, right? It's looking for some kind of commitment from us?
Yeah,
I mean-
yes, but they're not going to allow him to proceed to construction without us also proceeding to construction.
That would be another reason why you'd wanna do the design, is so that GMB can coordinate with Panoni, his engineer. to
Has
make sure-
Mr. Quill asked to be put on agenda, or would that even be appropriate, or is it just up to the city to identify that this is a street that needs to be improved?
I mean, we can put it on the next agenda so that we can get moving on the design work. Panoni did reach out recently to check the status, and I told him that we would be discussing it today. But obviously, we can't make a decision.
And again, Charlie, your estimate for the, or not your estimate, the design cost is around 15,000, is that right, for this project?
Yes, $15,332.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Why is this,
That's for the city portion, by the way.
why
Correct.
is it, who's gonna be paying for this? Seems like this is coming on because of the developer or
Right.
the guy owning the property in the corner.
Yeah.
And it's a ripple effect from what he wants to do or would like to do. And
Yeah, I get-
why is that not his
Yeah.
cost?
I get your question, but I'm gonna defer to Anne Marie and Austin on that, unless you want me to give you my opinion, but.
I mean, there's a couple components of this, because the sewer portion is related to the needs for Cape Henlopen State Park.
Well, what happens is if you improve Alaska Avenue and we do not handle our utilities, you have terracotta sewer main, and you also have an old cast iron water main. So the idea is handling that. The upsides of capacity would be if you add or put a factor in there for the potential, for example, for the state park, which you would do that now and then hold that cost with an escalator, if you would, for when and if the state park comes through.
So we,
And then assign it to them.
Correct.
we probably wouldn't be doing this unless the road was being reconstructed, because we don't have any immediate need for this.
That would be correct.
Yeah.
The
And
water,
would the development require us to upside the pipes?
The
Or
development, I believe the development does not require the upside of the pipe. For fire, it may.
yeah, the water main would probably need to be addressed, cause it's only 4-inch water main
Right.
right now,
Right.
coming down Alaska Avenue.
They would need it for fire capacity.
There's probably a lot of that, one side drives it
Right.
versus the other.
Right.
But I think, Richard's question also includes just generally why the developer's not paying for the entire project.
You know, I don't know where he is or not, but it would seem like his desire or his intentions seem to put this on the agenda, that this is a requirement for him to be successful in his development, and if I'm understanding this correctly. And it's not a choice that we're deciding to do this, and it coincidentally might help him or some other project in the works, like the ponding near Dairy Queen for Delta.
I know he's made some arguments to the city and the board, but I'm not 100% sure what
I
they
mean,
are.
so it is a city street, and it does serve more than that property.
Right.
And I think that was the, to put all of that on the developer, when what he would need to do if it was just serving him is different than what
Right.
we're doing, given that it's a city street and serves other properties as well.
So will he share it?
Does it make a difference that because of the scope of that project, rather than being individual houses along there tying, it's one large one with one maybe large main coming out? Does that have impact on pipe size and that kind of thing?
Which sewer or water or both?
Well, either of them.
Yeah, so we would design this project with a 10-inch sewer. It's 8-inch now, as Austin mentioned. The 10-inch covers the future growth of not only the I don't know what it was, 30-year plan of the Cape Henlopen State Park, but there's also some empty parcels on the way out to the park that are organic growth possibilities. So the 10-inch, when we did all this, we modeled we have the model of the sewer system, and we modeled it all. For all that flow to come down Cape Henlopen Drive and get through to the wastewater treatment facility now requires a 10-inch pipe, not an 8-inch.
So you generally, in most cases, you'll use an 8 instead of a 10 unless it's
Oh, yeah,
a large.
8 standard up to, what is it, Ben, 480 EDUs roughly. EDUs is like,
So if
each
he
lot.
wasn't in there and we didn't anticipate him in there, we'd probably put an 8 in.
who? The
new
developer?
development.
No, the developer could handle an 8. He would be fine in an 8. It's the Cape Henlopen State Park
I see.
growth, yeah.
So the question would be is that if we're gonna spend all the money on putting a road in, do we then wanna come back and rip the road out
Yeah, no.
when
no.
Cape Henlopen comes?
Right.
And so, you know, it's,
So just just to reinforce what Austin said, we would earmark the cost of upsizing the pipe from 8 to 10, and that would, at least a majority portion of that would be billed back to the state park once they start developing, their plan.
And then you also have the water main, and if anything is designated because of the development would be responsible for those costs.
And these are, what's there now is pretty old. It's some of the oldest stuff we have, I think.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like 2 inches difference in pipe's gonna make that big a difference in cost, is it?
Yeah, I mean, probably like $5 to $10 a lineal foot, yeah. I say that now, and then next thing you know, it explodes.
We're gonna hold you
Yeah,
to
I
that.
heard that quote, didn't you, Earl?
In $2023 though, you did,
Yeah.
you put that disclaimer on there.
What time is it though?
So let's keep moving through to the BPW portion just quickly because we've gone over some of it. So we're gonna put in a 10-inch PVC sewer. We'll note the difference between the 8 and the 10, probably by an alternate bid arrangement. Provide service to the existing parcels, and a manhole with a stub out to the proposed development. Abandon the cast iron pipe that's undersized pipe, 4-inch, that's there now, really old, and replace it with 8-inch PVC with a hydrant or blow off at the end, for just keeping it clean purposes. Water services to the existing 2 parcels and a T for the proposed development. And all that comes to $218,940, including construction and engineering. A total project of $372, $440.
And that's the same 10% of that cost would be chargeable to BPW, correct, for the design piece? Is that right?
You would take, so just for
10%.
these preliminary engineering
understand.
budgeting, when I put in their engineering and legal fee estimate,
Right.
if you take 40% of that, that's typical of what an engineering design would be. So whatever the board's, 40% of $55,500
Got it.
is an approximation of what the design fees would be for the board part.
So are the construction cost estimates, do they include inspection fees?
Yes, it's inside that 55,500, yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Richard, go ahead.
No, that was it. Thank you.
Yeah, I do have a question. Regarding the BPW side, is there any consideration, I'm not quite sure what goes on Alaska Avenue, my memory's not good enough, but the electric side, is that overhead distributed there?
Help me on that one,
Distribution.
Austin, I don't remember.
I can't remember what that looks like there.
You think about undergrounding?
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm going with that, is what about the
Yeah,
idea?
it's
of-
not in the project as I've presented it, but,
Correct.
it could be if the board decides to go that way.
All right.
What kind of uplift would there be?
in 2023 dollars.
Well, we're not doing the job in 2020, the prices are gonna go down, right?
You know, I'd say probably 30,000, 30 to 40,000, including the engineering,
Just for that property.
just for
That's
the
it.
electrical
That's it.
undergrounding, yeah. That's,
You're talking about the two,
Oh, yeah.
I believe Tim's talking about the two existing homes.
Definitely.
yeah,
Because the development would be responsible, any new service that's installed is underground.
Yeah, that's it,
Cost.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the developer would be responsible for.
I figure the one that's on Cape Antelope State, or Cape Antelope Drive is probably fed right off of Cape Antelope Drive with a transformer and a feed, but I'm not sure about the one behind it.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to look at.
I just can't, I don't think there's a pole line on Alaska Avenue, but,
There's a communications line.
right.
Let us check in on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like that to be considered by the BPW, if possible, to convert it to,
Ready to move on to the next one?
Yep.
Thank you, Blue. So Monroe Avenue, Freeman to Railroad water main lining. So we have a 6-inch steel pipe that goes from this side of Freeman Highway, underneath Freeman Highway, and ties into what now serves Old Town at White's Pond. That's actually interconnected into Schofield, and will eventually serve White's Pond Preserve and the Gibbs Commercial Site Development Plan. So we've got some other things in the works that help us with feeding that entire side of the town in terms of looping situations. So we think that we can line this existing 6-inch pipe. It's a pretty good candidate for it. The problem you have with lining water pipe is it's one thing to line a sewer pipe where you can actually shut off and pump from one manhole to another manhole. It's not a tremendous lift to do that, but obviously people need water, so the temporary system necessary for lining a water main is critical. So what makes this a decent candidate for that work is that we only have 2 house services off of this water main. The last 2 that are on this side of Freeman Highway. So it would not be a heavy lift to actually install a temporary system to serve them while this pipe is being lined. So that's the gist of it. I'll talk about the board part and then move to the city part. So we have to install that temporary system. So the exact design of that would need to be determined. I don't have that completely worked out, Councilperson Elder.
When you line a pipe, does it have the same longevity as when you put in a new pipe?
Yes. It's like a brand new pipe.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually,
CIP.
yeah, CIP. It's
Pipe inside the
cured in
pipe?
place. What's the word I'm looking for, Ben? Cured in place. What's the material? Polyethylene,
Yeah,
like polyethylene. Yeah,
CIP.
yeah, polymer. So it's like a brand new pipe inside there. You lose a little bit of the diameter of it, but in this case, it should be fine.
Isn't that correct? You're pulling it through the existing pipe,
Yes,
right?
pull through the existing pipe. Yeah.
Think of it as like sod, right?
Yeah,
Sod
exactly.
unfolds as you pull it, and then you usually cure it. at the same
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And that pipe is a little, the new stuff is a little flexible, as I recall, as it's being put in, correct?
No,
Is that
it'll
something-
be right up against the inner wall of
Oh.
the old pipe, yeah. You have to clean the old pipe really good before you actually do
Right.
the cured in place lining installation. We did it on our sewer pipe coming in from, Gills Neck Road. We utilized an old water main for actual sewage force main. And really the most important part was getting that existing pipe clean so you don't like cut the cured in place piece, and that's part of the work that gets done. Yeah.
Does any of this include, or not include, stuff with, Rob Gibbs's property? Is this all tied into that?
Well, all that water main is tied into his, and also there's plans for upgrading the system to serve the Cunningham property. But this particular project wouldn't be impacting on their properties or anything like that, because we would just tie in closer to Freeman Highways where we'd make the connection.
It's the two on this side.
Yeah, the two on this side, kind of as you're going towards
Yeah,
Old
no, I know
Town
what you
on the
mean.
left side.
Yeah.
The beauty of this kind of lining project, it's called trenchless technology, is that you're not digging up the road or anything like
Right.
that. So that's the nice thing about it. So you're not creating all that disturbance.
Now,
It saves a lot of money.
Has the potential, your money is usually spent in a temporary service.
Yeah.
Right,
That's where, in this case, there's only 2 services, so it makes it more conducive.
right.
We don't necessarily want to be guinea pigs, but I know when I talked to Charlie about it, they had done a project, where was that?
Yeah, Pocomoke City. Mm-hmm.
In the heart of town.
Yeah.
Which, you know, the temporary was conducive because you weren't tearing up, you know, older cobblestone streets or historical areas. You can also do pipe bursting, which Barbara passed some information along, where you actually pull
Yep.
pipe and burst through the old pipe.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of trenchless technology
Yep.
that are coming down the pipe.
And that would be a similar arrangement where you have to have a temporary system set up, but we can decide on the technique at this point. This is just a budgetary estimate.
Charlie, since this is primarily for new development, would the city and the BPW be able to recap some money from them in addition to the impact fees, I think?
Yeah, I don't think so. If you wanted to do that, we would have had to have done that already, I think. I mean, I guess you could ask something from White's Pond, but I think Old Town's probably not in play, would be my guess.
Well,
And this?
the one thing about pipe bursting technology is it works well in built-up areas and areas where you don't have the tie-ins. Otherwise, you have to pit at each tie-in to reestablish the house service, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
So-
so that disturbance.
Right.
yeah. Yeah, you don't,
And,
yeah, it's a plus and minus game, but, if you have a lot of side street connections, it's probably a difficult way to go about it.
and Charlie, for this, project, Monroe Freeman to the railroad water main lining, is there a, first of all, are you proposing curb and guttering along? No curb and guttering?
No, I don't think so. I don't have it in there right now, Tim. Yeah.
Okay, and so, do we have satisfactory stormwater management on that street?
Yeah, as far as I know, yeah.
Okay, I would like to think that we need to make sure we address that,
Okay.
so that we don't have flooding, we causing flooding on these 2 residents,
Yeah,
especially.
There's 2
Problems.
storm drains on the Jefferson Court side.
Correct.
Yeah.
That connect in going towards Old Town of White's Pond.
Right, and, the other question I have is there, do we have adequate stormwater infrastructure in this block from Railroad to Freeman?
To my knowledge, yes. I mean, we would probably make some minor corrections to some grades, but that's probably all there is. As far as I know, there hasn't been any complaints. There's a lot of drainage that ends up in that Freeman swale,
Right,
ditch, I call that. That's,
Exactly.
yeah.
yeah. I think that swale, and this is speculation on my part, I'll go on the record, I'm speculating here. But I've raised this issue before, my general concern about the different pieces of land that are being developed and have been developed, and the stormwater piece drains into White's Pond. And I worry about the capacity of that pond and its ability to have an outfall that leads into the canal, is my understanding, and make sure that
Yeah.
the volume that's going into the pond is going to be able to escape that pond also in a storm.
Yeah, this wouldn't be tied into the pond at all. Yeah. There's no work as part of this project.
Oh, I understand, I
Yeah,
just
okay.
wanna,
Okay.
just make note of it, that's
Gotcha,
all I was
yeah.
concerned.
Is there any widening of the road that's being considered, or is it just as is?
As is, yeah.
So Charlie, in this area, I mean, we just have that area that is tied into the intersection that just was totally redone. Is it still 65 feet that we need to do beyond that?
That was my estimate, just looking at
Okay.
the Freeman intersection drawings and what we did
Okay.
as part of the Madison
So that's
Avenue
beyond what was just done?
Mhm.
Okay.
Which, it's unfortunate that there's still a little piece
Mhm.
left, but that's what the city portion is right there.
start on the.
And that would be a thick section of pavement, because it's a heavily traveled road, and that needs to be thick with a lot of traffic on it now. So the city's portion is 79,221, including construction and engineering. Any other questions on this one?
I do have one question.
Sure.
Your crosswalks, you mentioned the thermoplastic crosswalks. Are they easy? Just in conversations I've had with some of the guys painting roads, is that something we can put paint over if we ever have to do it, or do we have to peel those up and replace them with lined? I'm just asking the question
Yeah, our
for future
experience,
cost.
our experience with painting over them is not good. Like, the paint will begin to
Right.
peel off over a short period of time, so you
But
probably.
the thermoplastic
laugh.
has a much longer life than painting.
Okay.
Yeah. Where we run into problems is where we use like brick paver crosswalks, and we have the
Okay.
concrete borders for aesthetic reasons, and then we paint those to have them show up a little bit better. The paint doesn't last long on that concrete, as we all know.
And the
so-
thermoplastic does not
Well,
last
the
long.
one-
And even
Concrete.
yeah, even thermoplastic does.
Yeah,
So-
the
It's
one
not made
reason
for
I,
it.
I ask that is because I'm told, at least by some of our guys out in the field, they said if you need to replace the thermoplastic sidewalks, you must have a special machine. You actually have to grind it off the surface.
Right.
and then put
We
the-
contract that out. We don't do
Oh,
thermoplastic
okay.
in-house at all.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah. And the prices for that are usually very reasonable from those
Okay.
contractors, yeah. Okay, so moving on, as everybody knows, we're in the middle of the Monroe Railroad Avenue revitalization project. Those concepts that we're working our design towards are shown in your handout there. I just wanna kinda, we've been through this project several times, with both the board and the city, but we can kinda go through what we're doing. It's a complete rebuild of the road, including the base stone, base asphalt, and the surface asphalt with curb and gutter. Talking about Railroad Avenue now. On Railroad, we would have new sidewalk, on both sides of the road with new 6-inch curb and gutter. Right now, it has 8-inch curb and gutter that we'd be replacing back down to 6-inch on Railroad, which I like 8-inch a little better on like streets that are connecting streets, like say 4th Street, but on a side street like Railroad Avenue, the 6-inch is much better in terms of like people aren't opening their car doors on an 8-inch curb. We kind of got away from 8-inch curb other than the connecting roads years ago. And we've also developed concepts where we've increased the parking on the side of the road, trying to utilize a similar system to what we did on Coleman Avenue with the drainage in the parking area with permeable pavers to give it an aesthetic look, plus it provides drainage.
Charlie,
Thinking
when,
of, excuse me,
I'm sorry. You go.
you're thinking of that same, doing the same on this, on Railroad, the same as you've done on the.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to decide what color you want and what layout of the pavers you want, but my guess is you'd probably go something similar to what we did on Coleman.
I just wondered if the curb depth would affect future pave-overs, where you'd have to grind the surface down because you wouldn't have enough room.
Yeah, so a lot of towns just do overlay over the existing, and then that does, you get somewhere and all of a sudden there's like this much curb left.
Yeah,
So we don't do that, we've never done that, we always mill it and then overlay it.
okay.
Yeah, that's every street that's part of the city's street rehabilitation plan is either a mill and overlay or a complete rebuild.
That's good to know.
Yes. Okay. So on the BPW side, we have water service tie-overs to an existing 16-inch main, abandoning an existing 6-inch main from the 1950s, and possible relining of an 8-inch sewer main. So we've done a significant portion, 70% is what I'm estimating, of the design of both Railroad and Monroe Avenue, so that's factored into these costs you see. Anyway, those are the costs. We're actually coming in a little bit under budget right now on our design for both the board and the city. So there's like $99,000. That engineering fee estimate should probably be $99,000 remaining. Thank you, for putting me on that. I figured that out this morning.
This is
And then on Monroe Avenue, it's a similar project, only that is a heavily traveled road, so the road section will be much thicker to accept the heavier traffic. But again, we are going with the permeable paver parallel parking system. We originally had it on the museum side of Monroe, but now it's on the City Hall side, and that helped in terms of driveway cuts and the sidewalk arrangement. So that's what we're doing now. We've met multiple times with the residents. We're working towards completing the design, and it'll be ready to go to contractor bids whenever the city and the board are ready. There are significant BPW water, sewer, and stormwater upgrades on Monroe, though. Like on Railroad, there's an existing 16-inch main that is fine, and we can tap into that and get rid of this old 6-inch that's serving a lot of those homes. On Monroe, I forget the exact size of it, but it needs to be replaced because it's old, and that would be part of the project.
How old is it?
Good one. Good one. Let me pull it up.
And that's from the intersection of Railroad down to Kings, is that the section, or,
Kings,
is that correct?
Kings to Railroad, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So is that a gap?
Yeah, so that is, it's older than you. It's from somewhere between 1904 and 1922.
Okay, I'm close though.
Yeah, so that would be the reason why we want to replace it, for sure. Yep, sewer as well. We have to still coordinate with Chesapeake. I don't know if we've broken that conversation up with them or not, but we need to do that yet. So for the city, both projects combined, would run in the range of like 1.55 or $1.455 million, including engineering and construction. And for the board, it's $1.3 million for both streets. We have talked about bidding the Railroad Avenue project out first with an alternate bid for the Monroe Avenue project, just to see if the city and the board would want to go at it all at once. So we still need to work through that detail and see how we're going to bid it and see if both streets would be done at the same time. Question?
No.
Okay.
I had a question, I guess, to Austin and Marie. Like, this is positioned as a 5-year plan. Like, how many of these are,
I think.
I assume, to Richard's point, these are ranked in order of chronologically how you plan to take care of them, or?
These are the areas where there are issues that need to be addressed. The utility condition or the road conditions really need to be addressed. So I would say if you roll it all up, it's more than 5 years.
Okay.
So I think
But the
part-
order is not important.
And the order is not, no, the order is
But
not
condition,
at all.
driven by condition.
Right, but,
Correct.
but that's what pulled it out to be on this list. We haven't ranked it within what we're bringing forward.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay.
I'm glad, I should have mentioned that at the beginning, Mayor.
Yeah, sorry about it. if I
So the
missed that.
prioritization
Yeah.
is to be developed, because
Sorry
we've
for
only
that.
talked about projects that are relatively expensive. We're getting to some that are really expensive.
You just-
Charlie, you mentioned Chesapeake.
they
Now,
don't
Yeah.
need it.
I haven't heard much about them recently. Are you coordinating with them, with all the projects we have going, that they might be able to put?
Yeah, we'll reach
Yes,
out to them, with every project. Like this one I know could be a possibility, because they already run a gas main up Monroe Avenue, so I'm basically talking about will they serve railroad?
Is the city still meeting with Chesapeake?
We haven't met
Sporadically.
recently. It used to be every other month, and now it's,
Well, you usually have to drag them into discussion, so.
well, they didn't feel that there was anything, I'm trying to think, that there wasn't enough to talk about to meet every other month.
Is-
Was that kind of your recollection?
I'm not quite sure why they fell off the radar, you know,
I thought,
they had lots of
we can certainly
excuses.
But I think it'd be
reconnect.
great, you know, this is a lot of work. And
Yeah, and
if
we
any of
have
these-
talked to them, whenever we have a capital project coming up, we talk to them, and I know we talked specifically about this project.
Not just our projects, projects in general, like
Right.
Delta projects.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And I think at least my latest communication with them, which has been a few years probably, is that they have to do their analysis to
Right.
make sure that it's
Right.
affordable for them. I think you were making some progress, you guys were making some progress on that.
We were a little bit, I mean, the problem is, you know, because what we're saying is while the street's open, isn't it cheaper just to put it in? But if they don't have the customers lined up, the payback isn't enough to warrant it, and that's where it gets tricky.
And sometimes they have enough customers, but then when they reach out to the customers, they don't get positive feedback from enough people to say, yeah, we're gonna do it.
Right, where they'll go in and they'll figure out what the conversion cost is gonna be when they go in and look at your appliances, and people will be like, well, you know, it would be nice to have gas, but not that nice.
So it doesn't warrant doing it.
Well, if we ultimately, as a group, come up with a list, and then we could share that with Chesapeake, and
Definitely, yeah.
that might give
Right.
them a good insight on how
Absolutely.
they might put their sales
You know,
force on.
I was involved in
Pipe
those
in the ground.
negotiations for a while, and they find every reason to squirm out of them. So they won't be coming to us, I'm sure.
Right, it's much easier for them to bring their service to a brand-new development.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, that, all of this is a tough nut to crack.
I wonder too how much the adverse publicity about the health effects from gas cooking and stuff, how much that will affect people wanting new gas service.
I know, it just popped out last week, didn't it, or something? There were some articles about that, yeah.
I did have a question about, basically it would cover any project where there's new surfacing put in. Are we giving any consideration to closing up the old unused curb cuts while we're doing this, so that we don't, when we do
Replicate it,
sidewalks and
yeah.
things, incur more damage to the road we just put in?
Yeah.
Because some of those are short, they could be easily sealed up, get rid of them, that way.
Absolutely, yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, well, like I know I walked Third Street last week for this meeting, and I did see one that there's no way that it can possibly be
Yeah,
used for a
right.
driveway.
Exactly.
It's done
I s-
because of what's been done on the yard.
I
So
see
that
quite
would
a
be-
few,
yeah.
and I always wonder about that, because I thought it would probably be better to do that at the time we do it,
Yeah.
at the time we do the road surface. Is that an extra cost?
Very little,
Yeah.
yeah. And actually, I think it actually is less expensive
Right.
because,
Do we need to make that part of this package that comes in, or?
well, I would say these are very preliminary estimates, and
I
that
see.
would be part of the final estimate once we get into the design stage.
Okay, and another question, if we have any corners where there isn't, I don't know where all the handicapped accessibility is that also the time to put in the
Absolutely,
inclines?
yeah. You're actually
Yes.
required to do that, and we
Okay.
do that. And proud to say the city of Lewes is good. I mean, we've got some that need to be addressed, but,
We've been doing that.
we've got to,
I've been blessed.
yeah. We do definitely do that. Councilperson.
Hey, Charlie, can I jump back? And,
Sure.
You know, one thing that you mentioned is a kind of a design feature. You talked about, the idea of an 8-inch, I think it was an 8-inch curve.
Yeah.
And a 6-inch in other areas. I
Yes.
think that's what you said. Is what you're suggesting that in what, you might consider a more prominent road, possibly, you know, the main arteries of the city?
Yes.
They would have an 8-inch, curve, and non-primary roads would have a 6-inch. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Okay, is that an ask that you're making, a recommendation you're making to us as a council to include in our design?
So I'm gonna add another little piece to that puzzle
Right.
is that when we do these streets, it's really a balancing act between what we do with the street, the sidewalk, the curb and gutter, and where the existing elevations are on people's properties.
Right,
So we wanna minimize the transition into their properties. So I would say, I don't wanna make it completely black and white that, you know, anything that's not a connecting street inside Lewes would be 6-inch, because we might even wanna go to 4. Like when we did
Right.
Madison Avenue,
Right.
you're, probably coming up on 10 years ago now, it's actually, if you go out there, it's got 4-inch curb.
right,
And that was because the homes were right up against the back of the sidewalk. And if you went with anything different, you wouldn't get the proper slope in the road, and you'd have a lot of transition on the
Right.
yards. And
and
that,
I'm thinking of 4th Street between, you know, along.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same.
yeah, I do
concern.
not want to change,
That is,
I don't want to change from an 8-inch curb and gutter on 4th Street. And I'll be honest with you, the main reason is if we do, it's going to be a tremendous amount of transition work to those homes.
Right.
And it's not fair to those people, plus it's costly.
thank you.
You're welcome. Do you want to talk about 4th Street?
Not
Nice
really.
segue.
You want to keep, you want to keep going?
Do you want to?
So let's move through 4th Street. So on the city side, it would be a 10-inch, it's a complete rebuild of the road. 10-inch stone base with a 5-inch asphalt system, 3 inches of base, and 2 inches of surface course. Which, by the way, when we get these projects done, just so the city knows, most of you do know this already, is that we require a 3-year surface warranty from the contractors, so they provide that at the end of the job on just the 2-inch part. So whatever that 2-inch surface would cost to replace, they provide a warranty to the city in case something does go wrong or it fails. There's 8-inch, like I was saying, type 3 curb and gutter. So here's your engineering lesson. Type 3 is the curb and gutter that has what we call vertical curb. If you go out to like inside Ship Carpenter Square, that's called type 2. It's roll curb. So it's just slightly, you know, it's a different kind of curb. Anyway, there'd be a lot of type 3 curb and gutter replacement there. There are 5-foot wide and 4-foot wide sections. I know that the section between Park Avenue and Burton Avenue on the left side as you're headed out of town, that's all 4-foot wide, and we wouldn't want to change that again for transition purposes. Something that we're going to have to talk about, a little bit getting down into the weeds a little bit, but take a look at it. There's a series of, I think they're either dogwood or cherry trees along that same stretch that are huge. The trunks are huge now. And they're heaving sidewalks, and they're beautiful, but they're going to be difficult to maneuver around when this
Right.
project gets done. So we'll have to talk about that as time goes on.
Haven't they taken several of those trees out already?
I don't know. There's been quite a few of them left, at least in that section. Yeah.
And we've battled them too on sewer services.
Yeah,
I can
and
imagine you did.
they're nice because if you look at them, they don't grow tremendously high, so they don't get too much up into the wires. That's why we go with crepe myrtles everywhere, because they don't really grow that high, and you trim them back every year. They're not terrible to the electrical power system, but you know, you can't have. I don't think you can have crepe myrtles everywhere, right? You'd like to have something new and different. Yeah.
And you're speaking exactly to what I was just gonna bring up, and that is, again, isn't this an opportunity for us to plan ahead and think about resiliency and the idea of converting our existing overhead facilities to underground? You know, we are a coastal town, we have high winds, we have reasons to think we're gonna have more high winds, et cetera, and I think it should be something that we consider as we do.
I'll let
any
Austin or the board respond to it, but I know it depends on the load that's in the line especially, because if it's got a high KV loading, our power department does not prefer it to be underground, because it becomes much more dangerous and difficult to deal with, but if you wanna add
We've been
anything to-
discussing this in BPW for over 5 years, and there
More
are
than that.
pros and cons, and I would encourage you to bring your comments to the BPW, and we can talk about them. But I don't think this is the forum for that, and the city is also not all the same. The beach is one area, and the town is another, relative to wind loadings. But even with towns that have converted their overhead lines to underground, during flood events and there are secondary issues, so.
Right. But again, I was reacting to Charlie's comment about the tree trimming and how the impact of trees growing in the right-of-way under the wires becomes a maintenance issue and becomes something that can be eliminated by the conversion from overhead to underground.
And I guess, what's the ratio of cost to overhead versus underground? I mean, it's a huge
It's a
number.
big cost, a huge cost.
Yeah, but there are benefits also, and that's what needs to be considered. There are benefits.
The other
And
thing
there are
is
very large costs to the individual homeowners, because if we go underground, that means they have to take all the services underground. And that's
That's
not
right.
necessarily inexpensive either.
Right, and people who live in overhead areas of the city now bear the cost of their service lateral being put in underground. Whereas if they go with overhead, the BPW will provide that overhead drop at no cost to those homeowners.
That's correct.
So we need to think about parity there, I think.
Any new service goes underground.
We did that on Second Street. I can tell you, just coordinating with Verizon and Comcast and Shentel, I don't know what their status is, but, you know, those
takes
guys,
effort.
it takes forever and they're expensive too now.
I understand all that.
Yeah, so just throwing that out there. One thing I wanted to add is that this project with all the sidewalk, all the street work, all the curb and gutter, the ADA ramps that Councilperson Elder mentioned, the thermoplastic crosswalks, the private property transitions, it's, on the city side, the construction cost is $1.636 million. And of that, Anne Marie, you okay?
That kind of hurt.
I did want to indicate that of that 1.636, 274,000 is just the sidewalks. So I know that the city has made a revision to their policy regarding sidewalk. So I just wanted to point that out. The total project on the city side is 1.881 million. I noticed on the agenda, I think, yeah, you had it broken out, Park to Burton and Savannah to Park. So I think the board wants to go all the way to Burton, but if you took the city side of like Park to Burton, it would be less $500,000.
I did have another question. As we're considering all of these projects, we're trying to coordinate everything and kind of think ahead, as you were, Tim. Bike and pedestrian safety, will the bike paths or walking paths, is this a time to think about that as we're redoing those areas?
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Yep,
How do we
this
ca-
section of Fourth Street isn't conducive to that because you just don't have the width.
There's no room there.
So but we do have a project that I did get word from DelDOT should be starting this fall to do traffic calming on Fourth Street from Burton to New Road.
So if we want to coordinate anything with the state in terms of these bicycle ways and all that, we need to kind of somehow coordinate that? How does that get done?
So
Just-
we start with your bicycle and pedestrian committee is where I start.
Right.
And bring them in. 'Cause
To talk to you, or?
yes, yeah, well, they
Okay.
talk to us, they give us feedback, and Anne Marie's correct. It's just really hard to like make any kind of real significant change to these roads I know on Monroe Avenue, we created some concept designs that actually had dedicated bike space, but they weren't accepted, they weren't favored, but we do look at it. And in the case of 4th Street, I think probably, like we said, it's a connector road. Getting cars from one end to the other is probably the most important thing, but at the same time, creating some space for the bikes to ride along.
The other thing, and I know this is a far-fetched, but as we're thinking of this, and I've seen it in some cities, where we have a lot of pedestrian safety issues, they're building lighting in the streets in some places. In some of our major cross areas, like in Second, that's not one on the list, I don't believe. But wouldn't that be a thing to have flashing things or overheads in some of the areas while we're doing this work?
At the crosswalks?
Yeah, where we have
Yeah.
everything torn up in a real busy place. I'm just trying to think
Yeah.
ahead a little bit.
So we are developing a specification for reflectivity in your crosswalk thermoplastic, so that makes them show up better at night, because we have had, comments that it's difficult at night to find the space or see the crosswalk, or people to see you walking across the crosswalk. But yeah, definitely we would need to. I'll tell you a little story. On Madison Avenue that we did 10 years ago, we actually, it's in the historical district, so we actually installed electrical conduit along the grass strips, I think on just one side, for future period lighting installation. We didn't put the lighting in, but the conduit's there to pull the wire and actually install the lighting if and when.
If we wanted to experiment with that, that'd be the place to do it, huh?
Well, it's not an experimentation, it's all set up, ready to go. It's just a
Oh.
matter of if you pull the trigger on it. But yeah, we would look to do that if you want to.
Good idea.
Yeah, it's good to get these ideas. So on the BPW portion of 4th Street, remove and replace 8-inch old terracotta sewer, 8-inch from Park to Burton, 15 inches from Savannah to Park, new services, sewer services to the right-of-way. We're not hooking these, we're not replacing anything back to the home like we've been talking about in some of the development projects. 35 of those, new manholes 11, abandoned cast iron pipe and replaced with 10-inch. This is, again, it's got varying ages. Mr. Webb, some of it's from about the same age, the 1910s and 20s. Some of it's from the 50s and some of it's from the 60s. But it's all, 65, 70.
I get the 60s.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Antiques Roadshow.
Water services to 35 parcels. Similar to what we did on Pilot Town Road, we'd do the side street connections and get the actual pipe beyond the turning radius off of 4th Street, so that if we ever want to do DuPont Avenue, for example, replace all that water main, we wouldn't have to get back out into 4th Street. By the way, that's what we did on Pilot Town. So all those side streets, we took the new main all the way beyond the right-of-way on, say, Rodney Avenue or Cary Lane or some of those. So we can just pick it up from there and take it down to the end of the road.
Is there anything newer than PVC that's acceptable?
No. Do you know of something? Okay, no, I'm not aware of anything newer. We still sometimes use ductile iron in certain cases, where, there's gonna be heavy load on top of the pipe, or it's more of an industrial situation, but it's usually ductile or mostly PVC. I have a feeling you know something.
No, I just,
Okay.
I read a lot of things and some aren't right, so I just can't.
Gotcha, okay. The other thing when you talk about new technologies is like, what's the availability of the material and
How
what's the
fast it
cost
is.
difference? That's a little bit why I hesitate on some of these trenchless technologies, because unfortunately, we don't have the contractors around here. We'll get pricing, if it's like pipe bursting or something. We'll see how it comes in, but there's just not a whole lot of contractors in the Delmarva area that do the work.
So just FYI, we have to be out of this building by 5:45.
Okay, let me keep moving then.
Oh, really?
I mean, I don't need to go through all this detail that I'm going through. I can probably just present the cost, knowing that a prioritization schedule has to be developed with everybody working together.
I think if you were to look at a project that's at the top of the BPW's radar, 4th Street is, and it goes beyond 4th Street, it really dives into 4th Street and the side streets, including Painter, Park, DuPont, Burton.
And
Going straight up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge project, and there's construction fatigue associated with that, but that is the old section of town, and, you know, we've seen
Yeah,
it.
that's a good section of town.
It is, it is,
So that was the page that we were just
yeah, so
talking to. You're saying this is the highest priority for your
I
organization?
would say not speaking for the board, but speaking
This
as,
one
you know,
Higher
providing
than railroad?
feedback. Yeah, for us.
Right.
It's
4th
it's
Street?
an old, yeah. it's-
Savannah to Burton, right? Again.
It's an old section. I mean, 4th Street has two very, very old water mains. There's brand new PVC on Burton that was done as part of the Mariners Retreat project, so it's just sitting there waiting. And then obviously the side streets have, like Park has probably one of the oldest water mains in
Yeah.
town.
And to that, I know we've talked, a lot of the neighbors are saying, we get a lot of rusty water and
Yeah.
stuff, and you've explained to them, and they understand, so they're
It
kind of
really
waiting in
is.
the wings.
And the sewer is very deep, as we've experienced the last 2 weeks.
And Charlie, on the ones that have zero, you know, obviously that indicates there's no need to replace pipe and things like that, but
Yeah.
in this whole vein of coordination, if the city were to take those projects and say, oh, you know, since there is little to no coordination required, we'll do those. Is there still an element that we would need to have a coordinate around catch basins or things like that as it relates to
Good question.
paving? Not that the cost would come on them, but just from a respective, you know,
Right, the evaluation.
improvements that might need to be done there.
Yeah. The thing about Ocean View Boulevard is it's a relatively young road, you know, it was in around 1980 roughly, so all the utilities are PVC. But yeah, we'd have to work around that. Generally, when we mill and overlay, we're able to move right up to the existing condition. The
Okay.
problem we run into sometimes, and we actually have addressed some of these on Ocean View Boulevard, is like on the manholes, anybody who's ridden
Yeah.
out there, you know, you hit that thing.
Yeah,
That's because those were set in like a concrete pad, which is a rigid
right.
material, whereas the asphalt that surrounds it is flexible, so over time, the asphalt moves some, but the rigid concrete doesn't, and you get these bumps. So we've actually addressed some of that, but if we were to mill and overlay Ocean View Boulevard or even Harbor View, we'd have to take that into consideration for sure,
Okay,
yeah.
thanks, Ron.
Charlie, is there something called a no-cut regulation? I've heard people tell me that in some municipalities, after they redo their roads, they put in place a no-cut regulation,
Right.
which means everybody in the area gets the final notice. These roads cannot be cut for any reason for X amount of time.
We have that.
We do.
Yeah, we have a 5-year moratorium on cuts after the road's been paved.
But even when you have that, there can still be circumstances that come up that are
Sure.
emergency related where you may have to cut. So it's
Okay.
never so absolute that,
I just thought I'd
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah.
Well, great
To ease
question.
your pain a little bit on that, Councilperson Elder,
Sure,
is that
sure.
the city has standards for rehabilitating any trench that's created, you know, within that 5 years or any time, there's a standard trench repair that keeps that area just as strong as the surrounding road.
Okay, that's good.
So, coming out of this then, moving on, I know you're trying, but just the, you prioritized Fourth Street, and then Richard brought up the Alaska, and then, whether that might appear on an agenda of ours, so I think from the city, I'll speak for the city, I think we just need coordination on those two parts from our perspective. Though,
Right.
if that's your priorities for it, then we need to move it on Alaska.
And we have our, I mean, for the next 5 years, I have our budget, I can prioritize based off our conversations.
Okay.
And that includes like Del Dot roads too, right?
It does,
Yeah.
but we've been Del-Dot heavy the past couple of years, and so it's kind of the focus of Fourth Street being kind of the artery and the heart of town.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I get that, yeah, for sure. The only other thing that I would add to this conversation as you're putting it, Mayor, is that if the end of Hornkill Avenue
Yeah.
gets served, then it might be wise to do the
Yeah.
entire
Yeah.
Hornkill Avenue, so just
Right.
keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's-
So I've got them all here, you know, Rodney Lane, Cary Lane, Hornkill, Harborview. Just let me know if there are any questions and feed me, I can give you some feedback. And I certainly didn't expect for you guys to come out and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 today. So I know it's gonna take some time to go through everything and begin to develop a schedule.
I appreciate the
Right.
detail that you provided with
Oh, you're
respect to
welcome,
the cost things. Yeah.
Mark Schaefer's been in the paper talking about having different hours associated with certain construction areas.
Okay,
Have you seen anything on that?
no, I haven't. Fill me in.
He was just looking to reduce the number of hours, and weekends, and, you know, he was trying to manage that a little tighter, which may increase some of our cost over time.
Is that for general construction, or is that for like road? So in the city, we have an exemption
Right.
for municipal and BPW infrastructure projects. Actually, I think
Town
even
Road.
Del Dot, pardon?
Del-Dot, that's Del-Dot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that the gentleman that spoke at our last meeting about the bridge and asking if Del Dot could run that 24 hours a day and get
Yeah.
it done?
That was a resident,
No,
yeah.
was
No,
it?
that was someone else.
But Mark would be talking about the county.
Right.
I still think it ties to us when it comes to state roads.
Right, well, we don't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that even the county has the ability to tell the state when they can do my experience is if Del Dot wants to do night construction, Del Dot does night construction. I mean, typically,
Here's the thing, as your engineer, the city's work hours are 7 to 7. But we've gone above and beyond through the years of only working from, not even after Labor Day anymore. If it's a Del Dot road, it's October until May.
Right.
So, you know, you gotta get the work done sometime.
right.
And, just keep that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about things like that.
But
Charlie?
we always do consider whether, you know, the residential context and all of those are considerations if we're gonna go beyond the 7 to 7.
Charlie, you've upgraded a couple of the cul-de-sac lots on the beach side, and there's some that haven't been touched yet. Are they still in line? I think Houston and Milton,
Right.
I don't know about Lewes.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where they stand on the schedule. I can find that out.
Yeah,
for you.
because you got a couple of them. I thought the others were in line, and I've been asked about it,
Okay,
and I haven't seen them recently, so.
yeah, okay. We'll look at the schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have, what, just under a half hour left? So, we should probably prioritize going forward. We discussed street and water sewer infrastructure needs over the next 5 years. I think we've probably done that. Lewes Beach stormwater assessment is probably,
Yeah, so the stormwater assessment, Charlie, you said that's gonna be wrapped up next month, right?
Yep, we're finishing up, we're actually getting some help from the board cleaning out and videoing the existing, there's quite a number of, more than I expected, infiltration basins and infiltration pipe on Cedar Avenue, and then also looking at the Midland Avenue system. So just the long and short of it is that through a lot of our field investigation after small storms, mid-level storms, and heavy storms, is that we've identified probably 4 or 5 areas that really are bad. And so, for instance, California Avenue, you know, big surprise, right? Everybody knew that. But also in front of the yacht club, there's one, I can't remember if it's Illinois or, I think it's Illinois Avenue. If, when it rains, the water ponds there, and to me, if it doesn't go away within 48 hours, then it's a problem, right? Because it's just staying there for a long, long time. So we've identified like 5 of those. Midland Avenue, strangely enough, it used to be that the worst of it was to the canal side of Midland Avenue, but something has changed that now when it rains really hard, the worst of it's on the Cedar Avenue side. So we're working on developing conceptual.
Children's Beach House area too.
Oh yeah, and that's where there's a lot of deltoid infiltration
Right.
basins. Yeah, definitely, for sure. So we're putting together a whole study. We're gonna give you the whole thing, the background, conceptual designs, cost estimates, and then we'll present it and, we can all move forward on that, but that's where it stands.
Charlie, you're talking about a little bit of stormwater there. And what I'm wondering is, you know, just from sitting in on the environmental committee and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
and I drive around and I see gutters that are just free-flowing out across properties into streets, down driveways into streets. Is that something that somewhere in our planning could help with the stormwater problems, that we could reduce them a little bit? If there were some little things we could do without having to do major work on these stormwater areas, would that help?
Yeah, I know probably part of like our beachside stormwater study will include a whole chapter on recommendations for homeowners
Okay.
to be sensitive to runoff, environmentally sensitive and quantity sensitive. So, yeah, I know when we do streets, we tend to look at like situations at home. It's like, where is that runoff coming from, and is it proper, and how can we deal with it better? So I think we do that a little bit, but certainly we can emphasize it more.
Right, one challenge is the building code requires that you direct runoff away from the building. So your grading has to do that, your storm gutters need to direct the drainage away from the building, which typically sends it to those areas. So, I mean, again, there could be incentives or I don't know, incentives for voluntary practices that would reduce what comes into the street. But, you know, you have to balance that requirement for positive drainage with the
So
fact
it's a
that.
matter of pretty much getting people to help, just to be good citizens and try and help out.
Mhm.
And awareness.
So at least our study will provide the tools to be able to present to people to, if they want to do that, at least if they want to do that, they can do it.
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we jump forward to the campus planning?
Okay.
And
I don't know how much is the,
Yeah.
Offer up there. I know there's been, you also did a space, net assessment study there, but I think handover is still more than a year away, still.
Yeah,
So is there anything going on, was that space study completed? Is
That was completed. So we do have that. Charlie has offered to, have, I guess, Morgan come and present it to the board in the city. And then, you know, figure out where we go from there.
yeah, I think that probably would be a good idea, so that we all can get one last cut at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I meant to prepare for that, because I saw it on the agenda, but then I never looked back at my study. So I'm not gonna talk about anything that I'm not sure about, but there are a lot of nuances to the, Army Reserve Center site, you know, and exactly how the city and the board would move forward with that in terms of getting all their needs into a facility. And then there's also quite a bit of, you know, factors involved with the Schley Avenue campus, you know, how that might be improved.
there any timeline on that, though? It's hard and fast, or?
I mean, what we were told is to take ownership 2024, you'd have to show progress within 5 years of that.
But it, do we,
And how do you measure progress?
yeah,
This is the
Let's have another
this is the
meeting.
government, so,
You've got a preliminary study done, I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
right.
yeah.
I mean, the other thing they said was they wanted to give us a clean site.
Right.
They said that more than once, so that, in my mind, and directly from them, it means they should handle the environmental.
has there been any phase ones or anything out there to see what the contamination might be?
You know, the soils, as far as I know.
Yeah, I
I
don't,
mean,
that was-
they know that there was some tanks that held fuels and such, and obviously there was probably leakage from the
Sure.
diesel, equipment that was out there.
But what I had gotten was that it was not as extensive as they had feared,
Oh, good.
given the amount of
Yeah,
diesel that was stored.
we were surprised at the few number of tanks on that site. There might have been 2. And one of them had
I
been,
think the one thing that we may need to take action on, both the board and as a council, is they did mention, Emery, as you were calling the mitigation piece, to let them know if we don't intend to use
right,
the building itself, then that will in some ways help the mitigation, because they can
right,
just kind
because
of haul
if
Yeah.
there's,
They can do the
asbestos.
if there's a chance we
Right,
could
yeah.
use it,
That-
asbestos needs to be abated anyway, but the lead, if it's being demolished, their requirements as it relates to
Right.
lead are significantly different than if it were to be occupied again.
Right.
I mean, I think we all generally know that that building is not gonna be conducive to our future needs. So, I mean, I don't know that you need a vote, but if I'm seeing nodding heads, we can certainly give them that idea that,
I don't feel that way.
oh, you don't? Okay. Okay.
No, but then I've not been inside it. I
Okay.
just think that, you know, we're an historic town and we ought to think about preserving historic buildings. How old is that building? When
It's
was
from
it?
I think what one thing Tom mentioned, because when we toured it, was the wind shear issue with load,
Yeah.
what
Right.
those walls and might hold up to in a hurricane force wind, I don't think.
Right.
Because it is designed for a Cat 3 hurricane, so those walls are probably fully cast with rebar, I would imagine. But other than that, I don't think the building has any value.
yeah, as
I
I
mean-
recall, we were looking at perhaps a 3-story building,
Right.
which would house the board on one floor, the city offices on the second floor, and then the public space on the first floor. So I don't know that the existing facility would be conducive to creating that, but that was just a preliminary idea too.
Yeah, there's not enough square footage in that building to meet our needs.
But I sort of
And
respect
it's
Barbara's
probably-
point, I'd rather probably make that our call on that, and then we can,
I
you
mean,
guys can do it separately.
My guess would be is that building was probably built in the 50s.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the structure
Yeah,
looks
it
like.
reminded me of the fire department building in Seaford that DuPont built that was like a, you know, this fortress when we got into it and did some things there. It's very similar to that, which was in the 40s and 50s.
And did they do vehicle maintenance there? Should we be concerned about degreasing chemicals in the soil and groundwater?
Right.
Will that be part of their
That'll be part of the,
ESA,
that'll
environmental
be
site
part of
assessment?
their
Yeah,
study.
yeah.
May I ask a question? Can we go back just real quickly for under B3, Lewes Beach stormwater? And this is not about your assessment, but it's about a particular project that I would just like to see if you could give us a real quick update. You know, I'm gonna call it the Storm Gate project. I don't know what you call
Oh.
it, remember?
West Cedar flood study?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, yeah,
whatever you
okay,
wanna call
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah, so-
there any update? 'Cause I think you were going for a grant, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
so the update on that was part of the reason that the adoption of the Sussex County Emergency Plan at the last council meeting, part of the reason was that one of the items that FEMA requested was that resolution that you guys adopted. So we're in the process of getting that to DEMA, who's facilitating our grant request with FEMA.
I see.
They also had an RFI, a couple of RFIs now, request for information on our application. which my understanding of it is that at first you think, it's kind of a pain responding to these RFIs, but it's actually a good thing, which
Yeah.
means, that means because they are actually considering it for funding.
Right,
So we've actually given them all the responses through DEMA to FEMA, and we're getting the adoption of the plan, of the Sussex County plan to them. And then what I usually do is just keep nudging Philip Kane from DEMA every month roughly to see what's going on. I might do it every 3 weeks now because they've had it in their hands for a while.
so is it realistic to expect sometime this fall, maybe early winter, that you might be coming to us with something? Is that
Yes,
correct?
I think it's realistic that if they were to approve the grant request, yes, that would happen
Thank
in
you.
that time.
Appreciate that update.
And then last thing before we get to public comments, really, I mean, the wastewater treatment plant, we hold monthly workshops. We had one 2 weeks ago, and nothing really has changed much since then. The BPW, Earl, myself, and Austin meet routinely with Anne Marie and Andrew to go over keep coordinated from that perspective. But I don't think there's much more to add. Tomorrow is our regular BPW board meeting, and I'm basically going to present the same. There's not much change since then. We are negotiating with the county an agreement, and assuming that we can reach an agreement with the county. Option 3 will be the way we go, of some form. If we can't reach an acceptable agreement with the county, then we'll go back to the drawing board. And Barbara and Earl are, Barbara's chairing a committee on alternative technologies, and you met yesterday, right? I lost
Yes, our
track of
first
time.
meeting yesterday. Yes.
So we're pursuing other alternatives at this time also.
And Tim Richard from the council is participating
Right.
in that.
Tim is the ex officio from the city. And I think with that, then, take questions.
I'd like to be able to address social groups about the stormwater issue.
Sure.
My name is Richard Ryan.
Come up to the.
Yeah, I had an hour presentation prepared, but I'll show you. So I know most of you know me. Some of you have been out to my site. I live at 25 degrees. And I'm sitting here listening to all this money you're spending. I'm listening to how you're improving all this stormwater to go where? The pathway it goes through is not being maintained behind my house on private property. When they put the bike trail in, I gave 3 easements for that bike trail. The last one, I said, I'm not gonna give it until you assure me you're gonna pipe and cover this ditch, and they said they would, and they never did. So, word of advice, get it in writing before you ever do it. Come on out there and look at it. I just got a bill from Coastal Landscaping today, $1,500. This is probably like 3rd time I've done this in the 22 years I've been there. It's not easy to maintain. It's a swale, and then the BPW came out and lined it with rocks. It looked pretty for a while, but now it's even harder to maintain. Charlie, I'm no engineer, but wouldn't you say from Monroe Avenue south, the water flows this way? And then probably from the high school east, it probably flows this way, and it all goes under between the Freeman Highway, the pipe they slicked in there, and then underneath Kings Highway, it all goes to that collection area behind the station on Kings Highway. It all feeds through about a half a dozen private properties and eventually gets to Drake Knoll Stormwater Pond. And then it gets under Savannah Road and goes on to Canary Creek. But who's taking care of where it's going? The private citizen, the private taxpayer. I pay a stormwater ready fee every month. I haven't seen anybody out there touching those ditches. Come out and look at them. I know they're on private property. Hands off, DelDOT won't come touch them. I've had them out there. Board of Public Works comes out there and says, it's a DelDOT issue, we're not allowed in there because they have an easement. Who cares? Come out and fix the problem. It's a mess. If it was in anyone's backyard that lives here, I'm sure it would be taken care of. My neighbor, I've been trying to get her portion of the ditch cleaned out behind her house, 27 degrees. Last summer, somebody came out and trimmed some bushes and threw them back on the property that were hanging over the fence on the bike trail. Friday, they came out and started cleaning out her ditch. She passed away. She's 90 years old. Her husband maintained it prior to that, like 5 years before that when he passed. So get out there and look at these ditches. They need to be piped and covered. The whole mess needs to be cleaned up. Yeah, I'm a good citizen. I'm paying my share. I want to see you guys come out and help me out. I mean, I'm not getting any younger, and it's not easy to take care of. So, yeah, I had a lot of things to say here, but I'll make it real short. And you guys are all familiar where I'm talking about, I presume, or does anybody have any questions? Well, let's get together and do something about it. I mean, I asked my son, who lives at 37 degrees, I said, do you want to go up there with me? He goes, no, it's a big waste of time. And I feel like I've wasted my time for 20-some years. You've been out there, previous board members, Jim Roberts, Jim Bell, they've all been out there. I mean, Jim Bell told me that DRBA slipped a pipe under Kings Highway in Freeman to get the water over there. And now I see that Old Town's down there cleaning that little area up. They're gonna pipe more water in there. You got development going out from the school. Where's it all gonna go? Yeah, it's good on this end, but where it's going, it's not good. I think we deserve better. The bike trail's there, it's pretty, you're maintaining that, you're cutting the grass. Hire a lawnscape company to come in there and maintain that ditch while you're at it. It's not that much more if you stay on it. I mean, the trees that we cut out of there were eventually, if we ever get a hurricane here, you're gonna have a problem with stormwater blockage. So yeah, it's cleaned out one more time, and it shouldn't be my job. It shouldn't be anybody's job that lives there to have to take care of that ditch. Any questions? Any comments? You want to reimburse me for this bill? I mean, or take me off the stormwater ready fee, because I'm just sick of it. I've asked over and over and over again. It's not a good situation. Feel free to come out, any of you. I invite you to come out and look at it. There's got to be some money. I know you spent a lot of money here, but there's got to be a little bit left to kind of take care of where it goes. Awful quiet in here.
We understand it. It's an issue throughout the city, so.
It's an issue throughout the city. What do you do with private ditches on other properties? Do you go in there at all? And behind Powelltown Park, Powelltown Village, there's a swale back there?
No.
That's a tax ditch. I guess you
Well-
get taxed and they clean it out.
If it's a tax ditch, it's a completely different entity.
What's this ditch? Just here to accommodate every development that's gonna come up over here on this quadrant of the east side of town? I don't know what percentage of stormwater goes through there, but I asked DelDOT when they wanted to tap into my stormwater at my office, I said, how much water are we talking about? Oh, we have no idea. And I'm sitting here listening to you talk about the armory, and I know that water comes this way. So whenever you develop that site, where it had 50 tankers sitting on the lot for I don't know how many years, it's all gonna flow this way to that ditch. Just keep adding to it. I think it's time to come in there and clean it up before you keep piling on more. But I asked some of my neighbors if they want to come up. They said they called, the Callens said they called, different ones have called, and it's easy to talk about, but no one does anything. All these new projects, you're gonna send all this water down there, it's gonna go right underneath Kings Highway, right behind my house, into a ditch that's a quagmire.
So are you talking about from Kings Highway to Savannah Road ditch?
Yeah, DelDOT came in and made that a deeper ditch to take a little more water for the bike trail. And now, I mean, you can't even get in it. And it's not lined with rock. It should have been piped and covered. The whole thing should have been piped and covered. And that's what they agreed to do, and no one remembers. Former mayor was out there. Several people were out there. Former Board of Public Works manager was out there.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Any help will be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dickie.
Do you want,
My name is Christopher Tim. I live at 122 School Lane. I'm sure you had some discussions earlier today on your executive committee about my property. I wanted to address some of the stormwater that falls off of the street. I think as a non-resident owner of that property, I've done the right thing. I went to BPW when we first noticed the problem. I went to the city of Lewes when we first noticed the problem. And the answer was, we'll get back to you. We'll talk to our engineer. Over 3 months, nothing. I had to hire an attorney. An attorney reached out to both BPW's attorney and to the city attorney, and it was crickets, to the point when we had to threaten litigation. During that time, we're finally at the place where I think they've had a private conversation outside which says, we'll get an engineering firm to look at it. We'll authorize the dollars to look at it. My question to you is, in your response via email from BPW and from the city, you said you already spoke to an engineer. You already said you did the legwork. So I'm just trying to understand, as a neighbor and as a person who actually lives in the city of Lewes, why is it that you won't do the right thing to at least engage me in a conversation? That's my first question to the council and to BPW. I did the right thing. I came to you and said, hey, how can we work together to fix this problem? I have a street that pitches +7 degrees at 100 feet. So I have almost 2,500 square feet of asphalt of the street that pours into my property. You want to know how much water that is? It's 0.625 gallons per every 1 inch per every square foot. So the last rain we had, I had about 3,000 gallons of water that ran through my property. I put a pool in, which I have a permit. I put in a pool house, which I got a permit from the city. I did everything you've asked, but yet you guys don't want to do anything for me. You don't even want to engage in a conversation. I actually did something on my own because I'm not a lawyer, but I'm also a developer. So I understand exactly what the things that need to be done. I've actually engaged my own engineer to look at the property, and there's a problem here. There's a problem that my neighbors, we bought the property in August. My neighbors have been there for 30 years. They have been complaining about this for 30 years. They don't even want to come. They're ready to get on board for litigation, but they don't even want to come and talk about it because they've been doing it for 30 years. I'm asking the council, why is it that you would ignore my request to be friendly and sit down as a neighbor? Obviously, there's no answer.
I'll give my answer. Today was the first I'd heard of it. This afternoon is the first I've heard of your concern,
Well,
sir.
are you the mayor?
Yeah.
Well, if you're the mayor, you were served to your council of the city. Is it not his job to give a demand letter to the council? That was done almost 2 months ago.
And your neighbor you mentioned that's had this issue for 30 years, certainly never heard from them yet either.
Well, I mean, I think it's for them, whether it's been 30 years or not, they're welcome to come and talk to you about the property. They've been there since School Lane was developed. And what you said maybe it makes sense, but what I'm asking you is that I already sent a letter to the city explaining my issue and to sit down and talk about it. But as the mayor, you're sitting here telling me you never heard about it. Is that just bad governance, or how does that work? Someone give me an answer as to what the next steps are. I spent $3,000 of my own money to take your stormwater, which I pay a stormwater management fee just like you do every single month, but yet I'm paying to get the city's water off of my property. I can tell you I'm not as patient as that gentleman. So the response to my lawyer this afternoon was, we'll engage, I believe, this gentleman here from this engineering firm to look at the problem, to fund that. I have seen today that these things take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5. Unfortunately, I'm not going to wait that long. I am selling to the council and to BPW, you have exactly 14 days from today to at least meet with me to discuss the issue, look at the problem. If you're not willing to look at the problem, we will proceed forward. I'm not the only one who has individual stormwater needs. So whether or not it's me, there's going to be a lot of other people that are going to join this that are part of the city of Lewes. That is all I have to say. You have any questions, comments, concerns? I'm issued to hear.
Well, the only comment is that I don't think any of us, we knew about the issue with Schoolhouse Lane for several months. However, I don't think any of us knew that there was anyone else on Schoolhouse Lane that was impacted. Austin has not heard from anyone, and Marie hasn't, so.
But my question to you, sir, is whether or not I'm at the end of the road. If you were to pull up the map, School Lane, the entire lane comes to my property.
And the only thing, and this is not to say we're gonna have an engineering study done, we're gonna understand what the drainage issues are. However, Schoolhouse Lane was last resurfaced in 2004. And nothing has changed on Schoolhouse Lane. So we're a little bit flummoxed as to what has changed.
Well, I mean, I'll be more than happy to present to the city council, to the mayor, and to BPW letters from my neighbors saying that they've been addressing this issue for years and years and years. But I'm not sure that that's going to even resolve the problem. I think the issue is that the way that the road was poured and the way that the grade was done is improper. And so it is not to standards. It's not to DelDOT standards. It's not to engineering standards. The water from that street, every time it rains, runs right through my property.
Well, the information from your neighbors would be very important.
Why would it be important, sir, though? Explain to me how it would be important if you've seen
We
the
have,
videos.
Janet has texted me and said the band needs to get in here, so
Okay.
certainly we need to be
The
responsive,
reason why
but
it's important is if we're gonna do a study, we need to know how extensive the problem is, so we can take that into account. You can't do a study on the blind.
And we're just hearing that this happened, we just heard about it, some of us tonight. But the bottom line is that you're saying that other people on that block have complained for years.
I want to let you know, I want to thank you for being here tonight and for expressing your opinions, and I assure you that we've heard you. And I'm sure there will be some follow-up. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And I apologize for having to call this short, but we're being kicked out of here. The Navy is coming.
I guess, do we need a motion then?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?